Welcome back to Where's My Sports At. On today's podcast, we are talking the Winnipeg Jets and the postseason playoffs, the Stanley Cup. So returning to the podcast all the way from Canada to do this podcast is good friend Donn and lifelong Jets fan. Donn, good to have you back. Thank you for your time this morning.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
How have things been for you?
Uh, it's been a heck of a ride this year, and following the Jets through their really high moments and some of their not so high moments. It's been of a roller coaster, but an exceptionally enjoyable season from coming from a Jets fan's point of view.
Definitely. There was a period there about a month ago where I was getting a bit skeptical as to whether they could make it. They were on a bit of a dream run there for a while, and then they hit this period. And it seemed to be, looking back at the season, they had um, periods where they were either right on or right off. But for you, looking back over the season, before we talk about the postseason, what have been some of the highlights for you?
Yeah, I mean the performance of Connor Hellebuck this year. Um, Arguably the best goaltender in the NHL. Uh, just an exceptional goaltender, and so that's been a real highlight, and I think a real strength of the Jets' defensive team. And and you look at the rest of the team with what Rick Bowness and Kevin Cheveldayoff have put together here. I think we have a true team of four lines, not a team that boasts your superstar and then three lines that are just trying to keep it together. So that's another real highlight for me. Like we've got a real team effort going on here, and when these boys work together and maintain their defensive structure, uh, there's I don't think there's a team that can stand up to them, but they definitely have to stay on their game.
Definitely, because we've seen when they're on, and when they're off, they're off.
Yeah, they can really stink.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
So, any other notables for the seasons? Signings?
Yeah, they made some really good moves at the deadline there with the addition of Sean Monahan and Tyler Toffoli. Those are the two standouts for me. They just fit in so beautifully. They're really two-way players. They're offensive and they can play very defensively as well. So just some exceptional additions, and they will help the Jets go a long ways, I believe.
Talking about the coaching staff there, I was reading online a lot of negative feedback, I suppose, during that month-long period about where Rick Bowness was messing with the first line. You know, he was putting Shifley and Connor together, and people were saying that wasn't a good mix. What was your sort of take on that?
Well, the numbers kind of stood for themselves. They weren't performing very well. And I don't know, at some point, you still have to allow the guys to play together to get that chemistry back. Yeah, and Rick was moving it around quite a bit. The other thing that we're not privy to is what the locker room feel is like. And sometimes that, I think, affects the coach's decisions maybe a little bit even more than what's going on the ice. So, yeah, I wasn't agreeing with what he was doing, but it seems to have worked themselves out in the end now. I mean, we're finishing the season with an 8-game winning streak. And yeah, they seem to have figured out their stature again.
And I read, like, obviously there's a lot of negative, and as soon as we start losing, you get a lot of people online, and they're just in there, having a go at the coach and the players. I saw one comment that really stood out to me, which made me think, and maybe there was a strategy behind it, and you sort of talked about it. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes. That you're heading into a postseason. What happens if you're super reliant on a top first line that you're always using, and you end up with injuries? The players have to know how to play together with different combinations. So one person's comment online was that maybe this is a safe time of the year. They're almost pretty much assured of getting into the postseason. So let's move things around but to try to form different combinations.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. When you get that depth of player experience, that itself goes a long ways. I mean, every player has their unique attributes, and when you learn how to work with them, it's just a good thing.
well, now the season's over.
Yeah.
It's obviously we're glad we're in the postseason because
Good.
for a while there, it felt like we might not be heading there. What are your feelings like? And you sort of alluded to it there a little bit that you feel that there's a lot of depth. You're feeling fairly positive about the run into the postseason.
Yes, I am very positive about it. Um, Playoff hockey is an entirely different animal than the regular season, and considering their first opponent, the Avalanche, the Colorado Avalanche, um, the two teams are their most positive attributes are somewhat different. The top three players on the Colorado Avalanche team, um, their combined points that they have generated far exceed what Winnipeg's top players have. Nathan MacKinnon, centerman for the Avalanche, he himself has 140 points on the year. The highest points of any player in the Winnipeg Jets organization is Scheifele. He's at 72, half of what Nathan MacKinnon has generated.
Mm.
And the next two highest in the Avalanche have 104 points by Mikko Rantanen, and Cale Makar has 90 points. All three are well above any points generated by a single hockey player on the Winnipeg Jets team. So the Avs have incredible potential to score, whereas on the opposite side of that stick, Winnipeg has a very good defensive structure. So it's going to be that competition to see who's going to be able to push their weight around and play their style of hockey. So it's going to be a real interesting match. And as of the season series this year, Winnipeg has won every meeting against the Colorado Avalanche so far. I do not expect that to continue.
Really?
Well, to say that Winnipeg is going to win four straight against the Colorado Avalanche, I think you get some pretty long odds on that one.
Well, it's interesting. You talked about the goal scoring, and if we look at the game results between the Jets and the Avalanche, the first one was won by the Jets 4-2,
Mm-hmm.
then 6-2,
Correct.
and I think the last one was 7-0. So that's obviously where you're talking about the attack and defense. So maybe the Avalanche players scoring these large amounts of points are against teams without such strong defenses.
Yeah. Well, it stands to reason in that regard, because against the Jets they just have not fared well, and so it seems like the defensive structure they're struggling with. But they are just such a strong offensive team. Um, you're not going to play perfectly all the time. And if you do get behind in the game, you have to start taking more offensive chances, which then again opens up the opportunities for the other team's offense to produce more as well. So it's gonna be a fun.
Hmm.
I truly believe that, and to say that it could go 7 games, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
Myself, just looking at it and not knowing as much as what you do or having the experience of watching the game that you do, just looking purely on the stats,
Yeah,
I would have said 5 games. That the Jets have got it all over them. They've beaten them 3 out of 3 by good scores. So it's just going to be interesting to see how each one steps up into the postseason.
yeah. I guess I give Colorado a little bit more credit than that. They are a very good hockey club, and yeah, to say that they're going to go in four, I would be truly amazed. But hey, it's playoff hockey. Who knows? Anything can happen.
This is right. And so linking back to last season, the Jets, I think their first round matchup in the postseason was against the eventual winner, the Las Vegas Knights.
Yeah, yeah, and we've seen it before. Sometimes if the Stanley Cup gets won in the first or second rounds, because you've got two of the top teams that are in the same division, they play off against one another, knowing full well that really it would have been good to see them in the Stanley Cup. But the way the bracketing works, this just happens, and you got to move on. You got to win them all. So
This is true. This is true. There's no second chance, is there?
nope, nope. So yeah, it's I'm really looking forward to the Jets. They've got so many stats that are supporting their style of play. Another one that they were talking about yesterday is that they're the only team in the NHL that has kept their goals against under 200. So no other club has achieved that this year. They had another stretch where they had 31 games where they had three or fewer goals allowed. That apparently is the second longest streak in the modern NHL history. So
Wow.
they've got a whole pile of stats that really supports their defensive play, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
And I think they've got a good balance that you talked about before, like with the recruitment that they've done. You're talking about a fantastic defensive structure and good defensemen,
Yep.
but they've also got some pretty good players in the front line who can score goals as well.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. Your top performers like Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele and Ehlers. All of them are very talented hockey players. Yeah, giving them the opportunity, they'll put the numbers up there, and that's just it. Everybody across all of those lines has the potential of doing that. I mean, the Jets are a real danger, which with whatever line they have on the ice, that potential is there. Yes, some are a little more dangerous than others, but yeah, I love it when you get at a game where the top lines aren't performing and the third and the fourth lines they drive the whole thing, and it's like the stats that I was talking earlier between the Avs and Winnipeg, where their top centerman has double the number of points that our top centerman has, and yeah, it's just a different style of that team plays.
Are there any factors? You've given us some stats, which is awesome, and I just love stats. I think it's what your betting agencies work on stats, don't they? It's not. They don't think they work on emotion when they work out the odds. Are there any stats that you've seen which are a concern to you for the Jets?
Uh, Nothing that really stands out. I mean, yes, I would like to see them have a little stronger offensive production. That just isn't their style of play. That's just, I guess, maybe a personal wish. And at this point, of course, you're not going to be tweaking your lineup to try and change that at this point. But if there was a factor that I thought I would like to see them improve on, is I wish they could have a little bit more offensive punch. But that's not the way this team is structured, and so personal wish, it's not going to change immediately.
Okay, so first up, Avalanche.
Yep,
If they get through that,
yep.
what's the other matchup in their division?
Well, Dallas and Vegas are playing off in their own bracket, and it'll be the winner of those two that Winnipeg would play against. And both of those teams, Winnipeg has struggled with this year. Vegas, I believe
Mm,
Winnipeg has. Let me take a quick look here. They have not won a single game against Vegas this year, and Dallas, they I think have only won a single game against. So that's going to be, I think, a
mm.
matchup than their initial one. Assuming that they get past Colorado, that'll be a toughie for the Jets.
Yes, it is, and you're right. There's some pretty tough stats to go against. I said I'm a stats man, and you said they're against Vegas 0 with 3, against the Stars 1 out of 3.
Yep,
That's but it is playoffs,
yep,
and they'll only be playing one of them. Well, hear me say they'll only be playing one of them because I'm assuming they'll get past the Avalanche,
yep.
and they only have to beat one of those teams.
That's right. Yep. And if I had to pick a team that I wish they could play against, honestly, I think at this point they might fare a little better against Vegas than they might against Dallas. Dallas is very strong, and but either way, it's going to be a tough match.
That's it. And on our little stats spreadsheet that we've got there, yeah, there are a couple of the teams that they did struggle against, as well as I think the Maple Leafs and the Oilers were a couple of other teams that they struggled against as well.
Yeah, and either of those teams we don't really have to be concerned about too much. They're in the Eastern Conference, and the Jets will
That's right.
counter them in the Stanley Cup if they make it that far.
That's it. And all the other teams in the postseason, obviously not going to play all of them because
No,
you can't.
no,
They had pretty good runs against.
yeah, yeah. And from a personal viewpoint, um, as long as the Oilers don't make it there, I don't care who they play.
Why not the Oilers? Is that a bit of a rivalry there? Is it?
Yes, absolutely. Coming from Winnipeg, um, Anybody who beats the Oilers is my friend, as far as I'm concerned. There are so many strong teams out there. I was just reading some headlines on the New York Rangers. If I'm not wrong, I think they finished at the tops of the season this year. I think they had the best points, and their captain Jacob Trouba. He's a big guy, a big defenseman, and he actually played for the Winnipeg Jets for 6 years before he moved to New York. And
Hmm.
one of those players that, looking back, if you could turn that around and have kept him, he would have been a fantastic member of the present core that we have now. And that's just something that you look back in hindsight, and everybody knew that they wished that the Jets could keep him, but he had his own agenda, and he decided he wanted to move back home, and not much you can do about that. And so yeah, just something that I noticed today, and was reading a little article on him, and it's one of those standout players that you had a history with, and boy, oh boy, I wish we could have kept him.
That's it. The if onlys, the if onlys.
Yes, that's right. And but there's that combination between you've got a salary cap and the momentum that a team has, and to combine the salaries that you're paying and the guys that you have to release, and if they're doing really good, they're all looking for an increase in pay, and that whole crescendo has to kind of happen at the same time when you don't lose too many guys, you're able to keep enough of the good ones to try and claw your way to the top of the league. And I'm amazed when I look at where the Jets are today. Speaking with some friends of mine over coffee this morning, and the attitude that we had about the Jets after last season, I was kind of like, oh boy, this team's going to be in for a major rebuild here. We are going to be struggling for some time. Never did I anticipate that they would be in the position that they are today.
What is the buzz like around town? It must be everyone's on back on the wagon.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Everybody's excited and amped up, and if you get the opportunity to watch a game, the amount of noise that's going to be in that arena is going to be deafening. And so yeah, everybody is super excited.
So they've got home ice, haven't they?
Yeah, they're starting. They managed to achieve home ice advantage, so they got 2 games in Winnipeg, and then they'll go to Colorado and they'll play 2 games there, and then I believe after that it turns into a one-on-one structure that you're traveling back and forth after that, if I remember correctly.
And going back to what you were talking about before about the structure of a team, and you would love to have kept players, but you have the salary cap, which is obviously the whole idea behind salary caps in professional sports, so you can even out the teams.
Right.
But I think a team wins a competition, not one player. You can have a superstar who can lift the team, but overall, when a season is as long as what it is, and then you have a grueling postseason,
Yeah.
you need everyone to be able to fire. So I think the balance they've got right now seems very good. They've got balance in the defense, they've got balance in the attack, as opposed to putting all your dollars onto one superstar. And if they're injured, you don't have a very good team behind them.
Yeah, precisely that. And they've got a lot of depth. When I look at the Jets lineup, you got a guy like Cole Perfetti, who has
Mm,
struggled at times in scoring this year, and yet I'm trying to pull up the stats for him right here, and he's scored just under 20 goals. He scored 19 goals this year, and this guy's being um, a healthy scratch. This is a luxury
mm,
teams have when you got a player of that caliber, and he's on the lower end of your depth chart. That speaks volumes
yes,
for the amount of depth that the Winnipeg Jets have. So when you have these injuries, you've got somebody that's going to be able to step up and fill the spot. You're not going to have a void there of a considerably lower caliber player. And so if the Jets can stretch us into a deep dive into the playoffs, that'll stand them in good position.
that's right. I quite like Cole Perfetti, and I think he's come on quite well at the end of the season. He's played and then benched and played and benched and played and benched,
Yeah,
but I think maybe that's just because he's younger. They're giving him time, to get
Abs-
used to the grind.
Absolutely.
But I quite like his play.
Yeah, I do too, and I think he's a stand-up kid. He's going to grow into that position, and yeah, I just have positive things to say about it. Yes, he has struggled this year, and I don't know what to attribute that to. And again, you never know. You could have a player that's got a nagging injury that's just holding them back. And as a club, they'll never announce it. They'll never tell you what's going on with individual players. You typically only find
Mm,
that out after the season is over. Yeah, so and so had a busted rib, or so and so had a major ankle injury, and you're just wondering, like, why are these guys not performing? I mean, for example, you look at Kyle Connor.
mm,
He was really off to the races prior to his injury, and yeah, he's gotten back into some type of form, but I don't think he's reaching his potential like he was prior to his injury. So like I said, what they won't tell you is he going to go in for knee surgery in the off season? I have no idea. I'm only speculating, but I really don't see him
mm.
performing the way he was prior to his injury.
Now I've got another question for you, and we touched about this in our first podcast when Kyle Conn was off, and I asked about him coming back.
Yep.
What is your favorite number one line? Because they've been moving Connor between one and two. What is your favorite first line, and then we go into your second line?
The two players that I really like to see on the first line is Scheifele and Velarde. And right now, if it was
Mm-hmm.
Connor or Ehlers up there, I would be kind of indifferent between the two. Um, that would be my preferred top line. And the next line that I like uh, is whatever line Lowry is on. I like his style of play. He's big. He's tough. Um, I wish the guy had a little better hands because he puts himself into some great positions and he just can't get that puck to go. He would be my second pick for the number two line, and again, it would be either Ehlers or Connor playing with him. And on the other side, um, yeah, that's a tough one. Who would I pick as the winger on the offside there? Uh, I don't know. Guys like Nino Niederreiter, I love him in there. He would be a good one. So, but they've got so many good hockey players. It's really hard for me to pick a perfect line.
That's it. And one thing we didn't think about in that as well is that not every team has the same offense and defensive structure or capabilities.
Yeah,
So some of the combinations, that people were not happy about during that run of losses about a month ago was the what was it? It was the Shifley Velarde Connor combination. But maybe against certain teams that combination works, and against other teams that combination doesn't. So we can say yes, this is your best first line, but it's really about horses for courses, isn't it? So depending on how the other team plays,
yeah,
you want to structure your players. If the other team is maybe not that great offense, you can put on what is it, Shifley and Connor together because that's where people were picking up that with that combination was leading through a lot of goals.
yeah, yeah. Like some of these guys, like Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele, they are more offensive minded than they are defensive, and so depending on who the other team puts on the ice, I forget what it is, but I believe the home team um, has the option of not putting their line out until the visiting team does. So you have then the option to put the opposition against it that you wish. So you often see it
Mm-hmm.
when the Jets games when they start a game, it's often Adam Lowry that's out there with his third line, just because they're the defensive pairing they want to have against the opposition's offense. So yeah, they will definitely the lines will definitely perform better or worse depending on their opposition. One notable thing that I saw in the last game, the Jets brought up a couple of upcoming stars from their AHL club, and the two were Lambert and Chiprikov. And both of these young men, I thought, carried themselves very well. They did not look out of place at all in the lineup. And both of them ended up generating points in their first NHL game. And so it was just a happy, feel good moment when you see these young guys come up and they're embraced by the club. And I think they've got a great future ahead of them.
Excellent, and I'm glad you touched on the players coming through, because that's something I'd like us to catch or talk about when we catch up in the future.
Yeah,
Is about the talent coming through, because I've seen some videos on YouTube, because that's all we get way the hell down here in the
right.
southern hemisphere,
Yeah.
and it looks as though the Jets have got some really good talent playing in the lower leagues.
Well, and that's kind of we. I touched on it a little bit earlier when you talk about Rick Bonus and Kevin Cheveldayoff and their team of scouts and the talent that they managed to draw into the Jets organization. Yeah, and that's where a lot of the Jets' strengths come from, is that development of their core players. And so, yeah, they've got some really interesting talent coming up. Another point that somebody pointed out to me that I had never thought of prior to, but for the fact that a lot of players um, don't want to play on Canadian clubs for the fact that our taxes are so high. A
Interesting.
lot of the talent, if you look at a team like the Vegas, the Golden Knights, um, if my understanding is correct, they don't have any federal taxes, federal income taxes on what the players generate there. So there's a lot of big sports figures that want to go play in these states where the tax rates are much lower.
Wow, that's a concept I hadn't even considered, as to possibly how players go to certain areas. But once again, they're stuck by the salary cap, isn't it? They can't have every
Right.
good player.
Yeah. So you can't have every good player, but if a player says, "Well, if I go play for Vegas and I can retain 10% more of my salary," that's definitely a deciding factor.
Wow, that's an unfair advantage, isn't it?
I had never considered that before either, so it was a bit of an eye opener for myself. I said, "Shoot, I had never considered that. Like, why?" And you notice it sometimes that some clubs seem to be able to generate more talent than others, and and this is maybe a part of that impact.
Are there certain challenges that maybe the Jets face as a club about trying to attract people to live in Winnipeg? Maybe if I was a young recruit coming through, who wouldn't want to go and live in Vegas? Or somewhere else that bright lights, big city.
Yep. Well, those are definitely some considerations that when you're not just simply focused on the game of hockey, you got to consider living conditions and other opportunities, and are these fellas coming with families, and what are the education systems like? Like everybody else, when you're looking at a move, you're looking at all the amenities and the other positive aspects of where it is that you're potentially going to be working. Those are real considerations, and yeah, Winnipeg isn't a glamorous city. It's a really northern city. It gets bloody cold at times, and for individuals who are not accustomed to or willing to put up with it, not a destination you want to come and live.
Well, if you're comparing, the Las Vegas Strip, if you haven't got a family and you're a young prospect, you're comparing the Las Vegas Strip to an icy winter
Yeah,
in Winnipeg. So it could be a bit of a toss up.
yeah. Yeah, not much of a toss up. Winnipeg is a real hockey town, so if that tradition is something that's going to attract you, and I believe to some players it would. Let's just say, as opposed to going to go play in the desert where the Arizona Coyotes are going to be moving away from, that's not a hockey town. They were struggling. They were down to a 5,000 person arena and they couldn't fill it. So
Wow.
it's an environment which um, I don't know. Coming just from my own personal point of view, I wouldn't want to go play hockey there because there's no appreciation for what you do, and so I think that takes a
Yep.
considerable portion of the fun out of it. And then on the flip side of that, I've heard players say they'd never want to go play in a town like Toronto or Montreal for the fact that the hockey culture is so strong. You are so scrutinized. Um, it's like you never have peace because people are on you all the time. And so these are
Yep.
aspects that being a fan, you maybe wouldn't consider from the outside looking in, but these are real issues that players have to live with.
Yeah, so true. And it's like, we don't think about these things, do we? When we look at people going to play for teams, and these are obviously considerations
Yep,
that the players behind the scenes have.
absolutely. Yeah,
A lot of the players who probably play for the Jets are not from Winnipeg. They've come from, other countries and maybe other places within Canada or the US.
yeah.
Do these guys actually end up living in Winnipeg all year round, or do they just come in for the season, then maybe go back to where they're from, where their families maybe still?
Yeah, I would have to say yes and yes. There are those individuals who, especially if they come with families, you got kids that are enrolled in school that definitely would be living there all year round. Some of them, I mean, excuse me, if their families are in near proximity in the U.S., um, they may stay here just for the fact that they can travel home anytime they want. It's not a big deal. And so I would say, I mean, it's fair to say there would be a combination of both of those, both of that going on. And then you got some long-term players that have been here all their career. I mean, you live and work
Mm-hmm.
someplace for 10 to 15 years, you grow roots. And this becomes home, even though you maybe originated from a state in the U.S. Yeah, so it's all part of that hockey lifestyle, and I don't imagine that it's an easy one by any means. A lot of
Mm.
have to have to learn to move away from the areas what they considered home, and you're starting a new life here, and you're extremely scrutinized by the fans and the coaches, and you never know when your time might be up in the majors, and so uh, yeah, it's a different lifestyle.
This is true. This is true. All right, Don. Well, I really appreciate your time this morning, our time, this evening, your time,
Yep.
for coming on.
Absolutely. Really great talking to you again.